Behind the heavy wrought iron gates of the palace, a quiet, ruthless, and historically unprecedented purge is currently underway. For decades, the House of Windsor has operated under the comforting, unwritten illusion that royal blood is an impenetrable shield, a divine right that excuses all manner of sins, scandals, and catastrophic lapses in judgment. But in the span of just a few short weeks, that illusion has been shattered into a million jagged pieces. The institution is no longer functioning as a family. It is operating as an apex predator, protecting its survival at the absolute expense of its own infected limbs. At the very center of this breathtaking institutional bloodletting is the total spectacular collapse of the House of York. We are witnessing a series of events so dramatic, so deeply consequential, that royal historians are already reaching back 4 centuries to find a comparable moment of sovereign ruthlessness. Prince Andrew, the man who was once the fiercely protected favorite son of Queen Elizabeth II, has been arrested on his 66th birthday. His ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, has vanished into self-imposed exile in the Middle East, fleeing a devastating avalanche of released federal documents. And now, the final, most shocking blow has been delivered to the next generation. Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, the daughters who spent their entire lives walking a delicate tightrope to protect their father's crumbling image, have been formally, publicly, and humiliatingly excommunicated from the inner circle of royal life. They have been banned from attending Royal Ascot. They have been stripped of their presence in the royal carriage procession. They have been frozen out of the only world they have ever known. How did we get here? How did a duke, a duchess, and 2 princesses of the blood find themselves entirely erased from the most famous family on the planet? The answer lies in a masterclass of institutional self-preservation engineered by the new, uncompromising architects of the monarchy, Prince William and Princess Anne. They have quietly drafted what insiders are calling the Magna Carta of the Windsor House, a terrifyingly strict, legally binding protocol that demands absolute financial and moral transparency. And the Yorks, blinded by decades of unearned privilege, walk directly into the trap. If you think this story is just about a disgraced prince and a horse race, you have not been paying attention to the monumental shift in global power currently radiating from Buckingham Palace. To truly understand the visceral shock of this moment, we must transport ourselves back to the morning of February the 19th, 2026. It was Prince Andrew's 66th birthday. For a man who had spent the majority of his adult life bathed in the sycophantic glow of royal deference, waking up in luxury and surrounded by deferential staff, this morning was destined to be a brutal, terrifying awakening. He was no longer residing in the sprawling 30-room grandeur of Royal Lodge, having been ruthlessly evicted by his brother, King Charles III, the previous October. He was now confined to Wood Farm, a drafty, modest, brick-built cottage on the desolate edges of the Sandringham estate in Norfolk. His world had already shrunk to a fraction of its former glory, but he still clung to the delusion that the worst was behind him, that his bloodline would ultimately protect his freedom. That delusion was violently shattered just after dawn. The heavy silence of the Norfolk countryside was broken by the crunch of tires on gravel, as marked and unmarked vehicles belonging to the Thames Valley Police surrounded the cottage. Officers did not arrive to offer birthday greetings. They arrived with a warrant. In a scene that effectively dismantled the modern concept of royal immunity, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, stripped of his Royal Highness styling, was formally taken into police custody. The specific allegation was not merely scandalous. It was a matter of severe state security. He was arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. The authorities were investigating claims that during his decade-long tenure as the United Kingdom's Special Representative for International Trade and Investment, Andrew had illicitly shared highly sensitive, classified British trade documents with the convicted Jeffrey Epstein. Imagine the sheer, unadulterated panic of that moment. A prince of the realm, a veteran of the Falklands War, being placed in the back of a police vehicle and transported to a standard interview room at a local police station. For 11 grueling hours, he sat under the harsh, unforgiving fluorescent lights, subjected to the kind of forensic, relentless interrogation normally reserved for corrupt politicians and corporate fraudsters. If convicted of this common law offense, he faces the theoretical possibility of a lifetime in prison. He was eventually released without charge pending further investigation, but the damage was irreversible. He became the first senior British royal to be arrested by civil authorities in centuries. When the news broke, paralyzing global media networks and sending shockwaves through the financial markets, the response from Buckingham Palace was a masterstroke of icy detachment. King Charles issued a brief, heavily vetted statement expressing his deepest concern, emphasizing that the legal process must unfold without interference. There was no defense. There was no mobilization of royal lawyers to protect him. The palace effectively fed him to the wolves. While Andrew sat in a freezing interrogation room in Norfolk, the profound tragedy of his daughters' lives was beginning to unfold in London. Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie were reportedly thrown into a state of utter distress and horrifying realization. For years, they had played the role of the dutiful, supportive daughters. They had stood by their father through the catastrophic Newsnight interview of 2019. They had weathered the storm of the Virginia Giuffre civil settlement. They had tried desperately to maintain their own dignity, their own charitable portfolios, and their own modern, hardworking image, hoping that the public and the institution would separate the sins of the father from the lives of the children. They believed they were safe, but the arrest changed the calculus of royal survival permanently. The fallout was not limited to Andrew's freedom. It was highly contagious, and it immediately infected his daughter's standing within the institution. The most public and devastating manifestation of this contagion arrived just weeks later in March 2026, when the official guest lists and operational protocols for the upcoming summer season were being finalized. Royal Ascot, scheduled for June, is not merely a high society horse race. In the intricate, highly codified language of the British aristocracy, the royal enclosure at Ascot is the ultimate barometer of monarchical favor. To be invited to ride in the horse-drawn carriage procession down the immaculate green turf, to stand shoulder to shoulder with the king in the royal box, is the highest visible validation of one's status within the inner circle. It is a globally televised display of who matters and who belongs. Beatrice and Eugenie were officially and quietly informed that they were banned from the procession. They were barred from the royal box. They were, for all intents and purposes, erased from the visual narrative of the royal family. This was not a minor social slight or a logistical oversight. It was a public execution of their royal relevance. The decision to ban the York sisters was not made capriciously. It was the calculated, deliberate result of a massive shift in institutional policy, driven by Prince William and fiercely supported by Princess Anne. The Prince of Wales, recognizing that the monarchy is constantly one major scandal away from a constitutional crisis, has fundamentally rejected his father's tendency towards sentimental leniency. William views the crown not as a family business to be managed with emotion, but as a multi-billion-pound global enterprise that must be protected with absolute corporate ruthlessness. Under William's emerging leadership, the old royal mantra of "never complain, never explain" has been entirely discarded. It has been replaced by a new, terrifyingly efficient doctrine: identify, audit, and eradicate. William and Anne have quietly established what palace insiders whisper about as the Magna Carta of the Windsor House. This is a comprehensive, non-negotiable framework designed to govern the conduct, the finances, and the associations of every single individual who derives any status from their connection to the crown. It dictates that royal privilege is no longer an inherent birthright. It is a fiduciary trust, a conditional status that must be earned through absolute transparency and flawless public conduct. Any royal who fails to meet these grueling obligations risks concrete, enforceable consequences. It was within this new, draconian system of oversight that Beatrice and Eugenie found themselves trapped. Following the explosive release of millions of pages of unredacted Department of Justice files related to Jeffrey Epstein in January 2026, the palace initiated a mandatory internal ethics audit for all extended family members. The protocol required complete, unvarnished disclosure of all high-risk financial connections, business partners, foreign shell companies, and overlapping social networks. The goal was to build a firewall to ensure that no hidden financial landmines could suddenly explode and damage the king. Most family members complied immediately, opening their books to the crown's forensic accountants. But the York sisters, perhaps under the misguided belief that their royal blood granted them a degree of privacy, reportedly hesitated. According to deeply embedded palace sources, Beatrice and Eugenie repeatedly delayed and avoided the full verification process. In the paranoid, hyper-vigilant atmosphere of the modern palace, a refusal to be transparent is perceived as an admission of guilt. This hesitation triggered a massive, non-consensual internal investigation led directly by Princess Anne's security apparatus. What the investigators allegedly found did not necessarily point to illegal activity by the princesses, but it highlighted exactly the kind of reputational hazard the new Windsor Doctrine was designed to eliminate. The internal dossier reportedly revealed a deeply complicated web of private investments, tech startups, and art world associations that placed the York sisters uncomfortably close to financial networks and individuals who had previously intersected with the broader, toxic orbit of Jeffrey Epstein and their father's disgraced financiers. For Prince William and Princess Anne, this discovery was an absolute non-negotiable red flag. It did not matter that the sisters were likely unaware of the deeper, darker connections of their investors. It did not matter that they were trying to build independent, modern careers. The mere optics of financial entanglement with any entity adjacent to the Epstein universe constituted a Tier 3 violation of the new royal protocol, the highest level of institutional risk. William argued to the king that the monarchy could no longer afford the luxury of giving the Yorks the benefit of the doubt. If a dedicated investigative journalist or a hostile foreign intelligence agency were to map out those financial overlaps and publish them, the resulting headline would be catastrophic. The institution would once again be dragged through the mud, forced to answer questions about dirty money and corrupt associations. The decision was brought before King Charles. The monarch, famously devoted to his nieces and historically reluctant to inflict pain upon his family members, faced the most agonizing test of his reign. But the sheer weight of the evidence, combined with the unyielding pressure from his heir, forced his hand. Charles realized that his primary duty was to the continuity of the throne, not the comfort of his nieces. He authorized the ban. The message delivered to Beatrice and Eugenie behind the heavily soundproofed doors of Kensington Palace was brutal in its clarity. They were told that their presence was now a liability. They were informed that their father's actions, compounded by their own failure to maintain absolute financial distance from his radioactive network, had compromised their standing permanently. They were not just losing their tickets to a horse race, they were losing their protective shield. The psychological devastation of this moment for the York sisters cannot be overstated. They have spent their entire lives defined by their loyalty to a father who consistently made catastrophic, selfish choices and a mother who operated with breathtaking financial recklessness. And speaking of their mother, the tragic irony of Beatrice and Eugenie's current nightmare is deeply intertwined with the cowardly, self-preserving actions of Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York. To fully comprehend the total isolation of the York daughters in March 2026, one must look at the astonishing betrayal perpetrated by the woman who raised them. While Prince Andrew was being raided by the police, and while Beatrice and Eugenie were facing the brutal inquisition of the palace auditors, Sarah Ferguson was nowhere to be found in the United Kingdom. She had vanished. The woman who had proudly, incessantly championed the concept of the York family as an unbreakable tripod, the woman who had lived rent-free in the 30-room splendor of Royal Lodge for 15 years despite being divorced from the family, had executed a midnight escape plan of breathtaking cynicism. Months earlier, in September 2025, sensing the impending collapse of Andrew's legal firewall and aware that the massive Department of Justice document dump was imminent, Ferguson quietly packed her bags. She slipped into a heavily tinted vehicle, turned her face away from the security cameras, and fled the country. She abandoned the sinking ship long before the hull breached the water. She sold her only independent asset, a luxurious townhouse in Mayfair, liquidating her safety net to ensure she had untraceable cash. And then, she surfaced in the ultimate sanctuary for disgraced European elites, the Gulf states. In early 2026, while the British press was tearing her ex-husband's life apart, she was photographed sipping champagne at the exclusive Art Basel Fair in Doha, Qatar, hiding behind the wealth and the non-extradition policies of the Middle East. She left her daughters behind in London to face the fury of the palace and the relentless scrutiny of the global media entirely alone. The reason for Ferguson's desperate flight became horrifically clear when the United States Department of Justice finally released the 3 million pages of unredacted Epstein files in January 2026. Buried within those digital archives were personal, highly intimate emails written by Sarah Ferguson to the convicted sex offender. For over a decade, Ferguson had publicly maintained that her association with Epstein was a gigantic, singular mistake, a momentary lapse in judgment driven by crippling debt. The emails exposed this narrative as a complete, unapologetic lie. In her own words, sent from her private account, she described Epstein not as a fleeting acquaintance, but as the brother she had always wished for. She wrote messages of terrifying subservience, offering to act as his property manager and personal assistant, famously typing the words, "Just marry me," in exchange for his continued financial backing while he was navigating his own legal nightmares. But the most morally repugnant revelation, the detail that permanently destroyed any lingering sympathy the British public might have harbored for the former Duchess, involved her daughters. The files revealed that in 2009, the very year Epstein became a registered sex offender for soliciting minors, Sarah Ferguson actively and enthusiastically planned a social lunch with him in Miami. In her correspondence, she explicitly offered to bring Beatrice and Eugenie, who were then just young women of 21 and 19, to join them at the table. The idea that a mother would willingly, enthusiastically arrange for her daughters to socialize with a convicted predator simply to secure a financial lifeline was beyond the pale of human decency. It sickened the nation. It destroyed her brand instantly and irrevocably. 6 of her companies dissolved within weeks. Her flagship charity closed its doors, explicitly citing her toxic reputation. Major health organizations quietly scrubbed her name from their lists of patrons. This is the catastrophic legacy the York sisters have inherited. They are the collateral damage of 2 parents who possessed an insatiable appetite for wealth and privilege, but an absolute deficit of moral judgment. Beatrice and Eugenie are now paying the ultimate institutional price for the sins of Andrew and Sarah. When Prince William looked at the York sisters, he did not just see his cousins. He saw the culmination of 30 years of sleaze, scandal, and reputational risk. He saw the very things that threatened to drag the modern monarchy down into irrelevance. By banning them from Royal Ascot and effectively erasing them from the working model of the family, William is cauterizing the wound. He is sending a terrifying, undeniable message to the rest of the extended family. The era of unconditional protection is over. If your presence endangers the crown, you will be cut out, regardless of how much it hurts. The contrast between the disgraced, exiled Yorks and the ascendant, triumphant core of the monarchy is being managed by the palace with the precision of a theatrical production. The monarchy is an institution that communicates primarily through highly orchestrated visual symbolism, and the optics of the upcoming summer season have been engineered to deliver a devastating comparative narrative. At the exact moment the public is digesting the humiliating banishment of Beatrice and Eugenie, Buckingham Palace has confirmed a detail designed to dominate the global headlines with pure, unadulterated positivity. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, will be making her highly anticipated, triumphant return to major public duties at Royal Ascot, standing shoulder to shoulder with King Charles and Prince William. After a grueling, terrifying 2-year battle with cancer that forced her to step away from the public eye, Catherine's return is not just a personal victory. It is an institutional masterclass in public relations. The palace is setting the stage for a dramatic, deeply emotional narrative of resilience and duty. Imagine the visual impact of that day in June. On one side of the ledger, you have the absent Yorks, hiding in shame, their father facing potential criminal indictment, their mother a fugitive from her own ruined reputation. On the other side, you have Catherine, radiant, courageous, and deeply beloved by the public, riding in the lead carriage, wearing the late Queen's most significant jewelry, embodying the very best of what the monarchy aspires to be. This is the William and Catherine era manifesting in real time. It is a strategy of profound juxtaposition. They are deliberately placing the undeniable virtue of the Princess of Wales directly against the backdrop of the York family's absolute moral collapse. By pairing the band of the cousins with the glorious return of the future queen, the palace is communicating a brutal, irrefutable truth to the world. We purge our weaknesses without hesitation, and we celebrate our strengths with magnificent pageantry. Catherine's presence at Ascot will serve as the ultimate validation of William's new doctrine. It will show the British public and the wider Commonwealth that the heart of the monarchy remains strong, dutiful, and morally sound, even as it surgically removes the decaying branches at its edges. The psychological toll of this public execution on Prince Andrew is reportedly pushing him toward the absolute brink of a total mental collapse. Sources close to the isolated Duke paint a horrifying picture of a man who has lost his grip on reality. Confined to the damp, unassuming rooms of Wood Farm, stripped of his titles, his uniforms, his police protection, and now his dignity, Andrew is a prisoner of his own making. He spends his days obsessing over the internet, reading the endless, vitriolic commentary about his downfall, trapped in a paranoid delusion that he is the victim of a grand, coordinated conspiracy engineered by his brother and his nephew to steal his legacy. He cannot or will not accept that his current state of absolute ruin is the direct, unavoidable mathematical sum of his own staggering arrogance and his horrifying choice of friends. Andrew believed, with the blind arrogance of a favorite child, that his royal blood was a magical elixir that would protect him from the consequences of the mortal world. He assumed that the institution he was born into would infinitely absorb his mistakes, clean up his messes, and shield him from the hounds of justice. He failed entirely to grasp the fundamental unwritten contract of the modern monarchy. Royal privilege is not a personal entitlement. It is a delicate trust granted by the people, and it is entirely contingent upon a baseline of respectability and integrity. When he violated that trust so completely, so brazenly, and with such a staggering lack of remorse, he effectively handed the sword to his executioners. The severance of his titles, the brutal eviction from Royal Lodge, and the enforced public distancing of his beloved daughters are the closing acts of a painful, incredibly necessary institutional dismantling. The York experiment, once heralded in the 1980s as a symbol of a more relaxed, modern, and accessible continuity, has curdled into the ultimate cautionary tale. The monarchy has proven that it can and will act decisively, with bone-chilling detachment, even if it means permanently amputating members by birth. This is the new, unyielding reality of the House of Windsor under the stewardship of the future king. It is a cold, disciplined meritocracy where absolute loyalty to the preservation of the institution drastically outweighs all bonds of sentiment, nostalgia, or blood. The past cannot be ignored, swept under the rug, or bought off with private settlements, and there is absolutely no room left for indulgence, even for princes of the realm. Prince Andrew, wandering the lonely, windswept grounds of Norfolk, stands as the ultimate tragic proof that royal blood offers absolutely no immunity against the relentless march of accountability. The monarchy has made it violently clear the preservation of its historical integrity and its constitutional credibility is absolute, and no individual, however high their rank in the line of succession, will ever again be allowed to compromise that sacred mission. The consequences of this uncompromising corporate-style approach extend far beyond the tragedy of Andrew himself or the heartbreak of his daughters. The institution is aggressively reshaping its global public image, drastically recalibrating the standards of behavior for all remaining members, and signaling the dawn of a new era in which discipline reigns supreme. The fallout for Beatrice and Eugenie extends far beyond the immense social humiliation of missing a televised carriage ride down the immaculate Ascot turf. The activation of the newly drafted Windsor Magna Carta carries devastating, immediate financial and logistical repercussions that are actively dismantling their carefully constructed lives. Sources deep within the Crown Estate and the Privy Purse confirm that the sisters are currently facing the terrifying prospect of losing their heavily subsidized grace and favor apartments within the secure royal compounds. Furthermore, the private trust funds historically supplemented by the duchy revenues to support peripheral, non-working royals are reportedly under a draconian review, with disbursements frozen pending the final outcome of the ongoing ethics audits. The York sisters are suddenly, painfully discovering that the highly lucrative, elite careers they built in the international art and technology sectors were entirely dependent on the invisible, protective halo of the British monarchy. As that royal halo is violently ripped away by the institution itself, the prestigious invitations to sit on corporate boards, consult for luxury brands, and helm international charity galas are drying up with breathtaking speed. They are being forced to confront the chilling, unprecedented reality of operating in the ruthless free market, not as revered princesses of the blood, but as the toxic, radioactive daughters of a disgraced exile and a fugitive mother. Orchestrating this brutal, systemic isolation alongside Prince William is Princess Anne, a woman whose entire existence has been defined by an unshakable, almost ascetic devotion to duty over personal comfort. For the Princess Royal, the purging of the York influence is not a matter of familial vindictiveness or petty rivalry. It is a desperate act of essential institutional hygiene. Behind the heavy mahogany doors of St. James's Palace, she has reportedly become the primary enforcer of her nephew's new, unforgiving vision, acting as the iron fist inside the velvet glove of the modern monarchy. Courtiers whisper that Anne has long viewed the staggering entitlement and financial recklessness of the York family as a malignant tumor that had been allowed to fester for far too long under the sentimental, conflict-averse tendencies of previous reigns. She has systematically stripped away the polite fictions, bluntly informing the royal household staff that aristocratic bloodlines no longer grant immunity from moral accountability. It is Anne who ensures that the taxpayer-funded security cordons are not quietly extended to her nieces, that the social invitations to state banquets are not accidentally mailed, and that the complete, absolute quarantine of Beatrice and Eugenie is maintained without a single, momentary lapse in discipline. Her cold, pragmatic calculus has terrified the extended members of the family, proving unequivocally that the old, comfortable era of blind aristocratic protection is officially dead and buried. This surgical removal of the Yorks is sending a chilling, unmistakable message that reverberates far beyond the borders of the United Kingdom, echoing loudly in the boardrooms of international media conglomerates and the sprawling mansions of other exiled royals in California. Prince William and Princess Anne are constructing an impenetrable fortress around the throne, actively pulling up the drawbridge and flooding the moat to protect the core working royals from the contaminating, destructive influence of scandal. By publicly sacrificing his own cousins and completely banishing his uncle to the shadows of history, the future king is declaring to the global public that the royal brand can no longer be licensed, leveraged, or leaned upon by those who do not actively serve its grueling daily demands. The monarchy is aggressively shedding its excess weight, transforming from a sprawling, unmanageable aristocratic family into a lean, fiercely guarded, state-sanctioned corporation built on absolute integrity. Those who remain inside the protective walls are expected to offer flawless, unimpeachable service, while those who carry even the slightest hint of reputational baggage are cast out into the cold, left to fend for themselves in a world that no longer cares about their inherited titles. The public execution of the York's royal status is the ultimate, terrifying proof that the crown will survive the 21st century, even if it has to mercilessly devour its own to do so. As the storm clouds continue to gather over the United Kingdom in the spring of 2026, the British public watches with a mixture of fascination, horror, and profound relief. They are witnessing the painful, necessary evolution of a thousand-year-old institution. They are watching a future king learn how to wield the terrible, isolating power of the crown, making the agonizing choices that ensure the throne survives the modern age of digital scrutiny and relentless demand for transparency. Prince William has drawn a line in the sand, written in the ink of strict protocol and enforced by the threat of total exile. You leave the protections of the crown by choice, but you remain within them only by flawless conduct. The gates of Royal Ascot will open in June to a display of magnificent, triumphant pageantry, celebrating the resilience of a princess who fought for her life and returned to her duty. But outside those gates, looking in from the cold, isolated wilderness of their own making, the Yorks will serve as the permanent, haunting reminder of the devastating price of arrogance. The crown endures not because it is immune to infection, but because it possesses the terrifying strength to cut away the disease before it reaches the heart.